Hi, everyone. So for the first time in the history of America, solar is cheap enough that it can help all of us in this room save money on our electricity bills. Can I ask you a question? How many of you have solar on your rooftop? Can you raise your hand? Take a look around. This is not uncommon. And it's not just that you have to be a unicorn to get solar in this country. It's pretty common that we can't. Actually, 77% of us are locked out of the rooftop solar market for a number of reasons. Maybe you're, have the wrong credit score, you can't get solar financing, or you can't pay for the upfront cost of getting solar. Maybe you're a renter or condo owner, you don't have the actual roof to put solar on. Or maybe there's a tree covering your roof. It's facing the wrong way or it's made out of the wrong materials. So solar will never be a big business until we learn to serve 80% of Americans. And the good news is there's a solution out there and it's called community solar. So community solar means you don't have to worry about installing anything on your rooftop. You can buy a portion of a neighborhood shared solar farm and switch to solar that way. There's no upfront cost. It's a subscription model. You pay for the power that's produced by your share. And how it works is the electricity goes from the farm back to the grid, and you see a credit show up on your monthly utility bill for the solar that your share produces. You can think of it like a community garden, but for solar. And this was actually a solar farm that we worked on in Dover, Massachusetts. It used to be a landfill, and now it's a solar garden that serves the town there. And the Department of Energy says that this is going to be a $16 billion industry by 2020. To give you some context for how quickly this has grown, 3 years ago, 15 states across the United States had community solar programs. Now that number in just 3 years is 42 states. We anticipate that the portion of the $16 billion industry that we can address is $2 billion by 2020 and growing exponentially from there. So what does Solstice do? We're not developers, we're not the ones that are building the solar farms, because there are actually thousands of those already. We provide the turnkey customer software solution that allows for these projects to be made possible. So first, you can go on our website and go on our online marketplace, put in your zip code, see what solar gardens are available to you. You can sign up easily in 10 minutes or less. And we do the hard work to work with your utilities to let them know that you now have a solar share and you're gonna get credited for it. Once it's turned on, you can see how your solar share is doing, you can get billed, you can see how much environmental impact you're having. And then lastly, you can tell your friends and neighbors about community solar. Because there's one thing that we know about solar, and that people sign up for solar because their friend or their neighbor signed up for solar. So solar is literally contagious in personal networks. Yet there are 3 ways that every solar company out there will sell solar to you. One is you'll get a piece of direct mail at your house from a stranger. You'll get someone to show up at your door, knocking on your door from a stranger. Or number 3, a stranger will yell at you as you walk by in Home Depot and tell you to buy solar from them. That is the only ways that solar companies sell solar. And yet we are taking the community organizing and micro-targeting lessons that we learned on the Obama campaign, and we're applying it to the spread of solar virally throughout communities. So what does Solstice do is really bringing the 2 sides of the solar marketplace together. On the one hand, you have these solar developers. They're building these solar farms, and they want to just build the farm and see their cash flows come in. They have no desire, nor sometimes the capacity, to sign up customers and manage them in a software platform thousands at a time. Solstice is bringing the households and the community organizations and the corporations that want energy savings to the solar project developers. We're creating that market demand through our software, through our unique go-to-market strategy. And as it turns out, it's incredibly lucrative to take care of the customer generation, the market demand. And the reason is because developers cannot build their solar farms until they line up the customers for them. They cannot get the financing to build their solar farms until you find the customers. We get paid $850 for every customer we bring into a project, as well as a recurring fee per household per year that we're managing in our software platform. So this is not software as a service, this is solar as a service, a different kind of SaaS model where we can monetize upfront and recurring revenue and spread solar virally throughout communities. And all this isn't hypothetical either. We've worked on 15 projects throughout Massachusetts and New York, mostly, and we're currently, slides are working, there you go. We're currently talking to 13 developers to work on 150 megawatts of capacity that's coming online in the next year. We've already generated, this slide's actually a little bit out of date, we've already generated 45 megawatts of demand for solar in Massachusetts and New York. And we're partnered with some of the largest developers in the country for community solar. In the bottom right is actually a software competitor of ours, Ampion. And they are the software provider for community solar projects, but they brought us in because we do customer acquisition. And every other software company out there doesn't specialize in customer acquisition. And what developers need are vendors that do both customer acquisition and customer management. If you own that whole customer relationship, then you can create a lot of value for developers. And we have ambitious plans to grow. We're already creating revenue. We have $300,000 in revenue. We created more revenue in Q1 of this year than all of last year combined. And I mentioned that we're in discussion with 150 megawatts of solar coming online in the next year. In order to make $3 million in revenue, we only have to work on 20 megawatts of that. So the growth is explosive. We are poised to grow along with that growth. To be good in this industry, you have to know communities. You have to know energy policy, and you have to have software that can scale. We organized communities on the Obama campaign. We wrote policy at the White House. And we have MIT software engineers backed with machine learning data analytics around customer preferences, where we can underwrite and target customers better than any other company out there. And a list of advisors comes from investors, it comes from Gina McCarthy, who was the Obama EPA administrator, as well as technology executives. We're raising a 1.5 seed round, of which we've already have 900,000 in commitments. And we're taking that to take us through the next year. We're gonna reach our break-even point of 4,000 customers and make our software more sophisticated so that we can be the dominant software platform in community solar nationwide. We're looking to expand in the next year to Maryland, Rhode Island, Illinois, Minnesota, and California. And we're imagining an America that's filled with solar arrays. And it doesn't matter what kind of roof you have. And with your help, we can get there. So thank you.
Go ahead, panelists. Let her rip.
Okay, I guess ladies first. I was wondering, how do you get the low-income household engaged in such a product? Because I guess you said that it's really for homeowners or households that do not have any access to rooftops. So what's your strategy? And I have a second question. Where do you find the space to install this panel? And do the guy who lends you or that field is receiving any income? How do you make that incentive and real? Thank you.
Yeah, so the second question first, where are these built on? They're built on generally brownfields, old landfills, or farmland. And the farmland that is used for these projects are generally land that the farmers wouldn't do agriculture on. Basically, it's passive income for them. It allows them to keep their farms open. It creates revenue for them. They get a lease payment, generally speaking. Or if it's a municipal landfill, like the picture I showed you earlier that we worked on, that was a lease payment to the city of Dover. Does that make sense? Okay, so for your first question is, how do you serve low-income populations? We are out to serve every single American to make sure that everyone can benefit from solar. And community solar gives you generally a 10% discount off your electricity bill. No upfront cost, no need to put anything on your roof. So it's actually the most accessible and affordable type of clean energy in the country right now. So we just got selected 2 weeks ago by the New York City Housing Authority to do the first community solar project in New York City on public housing in Queens. And so the farms will be built on the roofs of 27 buildings, public housing in New York City and Queens, and the tenants will get discounts on their electricity bills. So there are ways that you can make this more accessible to the average American, and community solar is the answer that that no other clean energy solution has been able to offer to date.
So first off, I'll say what you're doing is awesome. And second, as you know, and everybody in solar is both friends and competitors, and so there's a bunch of questions I want to ask you that are inappropriate because I compete with you while loving your business. So, but one question that I will ask, being in this business alongside of you, so when I hear 310K of revenue and that's 850 per, so let's call it 350 customers so far this year, and we both know how hard it is to get them, but are you confident and comfortable in your cost to acquire? One thing we've seen is cost to acquire varies so greatly. I mean, it's really all over the map based physically on where those projects are. And we've seen some projects that we were really confident we're underwater on cost to acquire versus the revenue per, and others where we're doing great. Do you feel like you have enough data where you can confidently talk to investors about what your real margin is on that cost to acquire?
Yeah, we have actually decreased our cost of customer acquisition by almost half this year. So, and how we did that was, one, implementing this community contagion effect go-to-market strategy. So strangers signing people up is very expensive. Door-to-door is very expensive. But when we found early adopters digitally online, using that micro-targeting that I mentioned earlier, and we turn those early adopters into ambassadors that sign up their friends and networks, the conversion rate on that is 72%. Compare that to any other, customer acquisition pretty well in this industry. Typically, customer acquisition conversion rates in solar are low single digits, which is why it's so expensive. And we achieve set conversion rates of 72% with our ambassador model, and that's decreased our costs, plus our investment in digital marketing. So I wouldn't be in this if I didn't think we could scale and do this at a really large level across the country, but we are getting better every day.
Awesome, thanks.
Just to understand the community solar model, is it, I mean, it's not like you have it on your roof and you're offsetting your own usage, right? Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me? So just to understand the community solar model, it's not as though you have it on your roof and you're offsetting your own usage. It's almost like a financing model for the solar farms, right?
Yeah, so the upfront cost of these shared solar farms are not borne by the customer. They're borne by the developers and the financiers who back them. And then the customer is subscribing to the shared solar farm. So the actual electrons are not going to the end user's home directly through the grid, but they're getting credited. And then more importantly, this farm would not be built if you didn't sign up for it. If the customers don't sign up, this farm doesn't exist in this world. So that's how people can still feel like they're contributing to putting more solar in the ground, even if it's not on their roof, even if the actual electrons aren't going to their home.
And what's the return for the customers on that?
So generally, for every dollar they would have paid the utility for for regular energy, they're now paying 90 cents. So they're saving 10% that way. No upfront cost.
Hi, I loved your presentation. As one of the few people, I believe, who raised their hand at the beginning, I've seen.
Congratulations, you're a unicorn.
No, as in, I do have solar on my roof, so I really think what you're doing addresses some of the very obvious problems of, for example, as you said, solar so far mostly marketing itself by, for example, me getting flyers in my mail. We pay you $50 if you put our banner on your front yard or what have you, right?
Yeah.
So you're solving that problem. You're also solving the problem of sort of a balkanization of solar on different rooftops by creating a bundling effect. All that is great. And a lot of what you're doing is great. And really, I was almost starting to fish for what I could, prod a little bit. And then I realized that I was a little bit worried about your very aggressive expansion strategy. You mentioned a ton of different places where you're going and a ton of different types of customers where you're going. It's a place that is, for example, not naturally for low-income communities. So I'm presuming you're not only doing low-income communities, but now you're also doing low-income communities. So can you give us a sense of your strategy of where you're going from a presumably still somewhat limited scope to, world domination?
Yeah, so it's important to focus as a startup, to be sure, which is why we wanted to make sure that we could do it very well in a geographic location and then make a playbook that could be expanded to different parts of the country. So looking at these expansion plans, look at the second line. We're talking about, to date, working on a handful of megawatts. This year, working on 20 megawatts for $3 million in revenue. But then by 2022, working on, nearly a gigawatt. And there's actually much more capacity coming online. SEIA and GTM both predict that by 2020, we'll see 1.8 gigawatts of community solar built in this country. It's doubled capacity every year in the last 3 years. So this is aggressive, sure, but this is a portion of what is coming online. And so we can actually even grow to meet that demand if we get infusion of capital earlier. Thank you.